God of mercy and compassion, look with pity upon me. Father, let me call thee Father.
Good day, everyone. Today is Palm Sunday, and we are reflecting on celebrating our victory over the real enemy. Following the traditions of the church, Palm Sunday marks the beginning of Holy Week. Holy Week culminates in the celebration of the Passion and finally the resurrection of Christ on Easter Sunday. Palm Sunday also marks the celebration of the last week of the earthly life of Jesus. The Bible was quite clear on the details of this event of Palm Sunday. One of some of such detail is the fact that as Jesus entered into Jerusalem, the people spread their clothes and branches to honor him. This was captured in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but there was no specification of the kind of branches that were used. It was only in the Gospel of John that it was mentioned categorically that it was palm branches that the people held in honor of Jesus. So this gets me curious. As a young child, I was very inquisitive and will ask so many questions. I'd always wondered why we use palm branches on Palm Sunday. Why not banana leaves? I remember that my catechist will answer me, Patrick, what's your problem? It was palm branches that the Bible said they used, period. Well, at that time, I accepted it and kept my cool. But I kept asking questions within me. But then, with further inquiries and studies, yes, I found what I felt must have been the significance of the use of palm branches in particular. Let us look back a little at the history of the Jews. For very many centuries, they kept being colonized by superpowers. They always looked forward to their liberation and freedom. At first, it was the Assyrians that colonized them. Then second, the Babylonians, and third, the Persians took over. And fourth, you had the Greeks. And finally, you had the Romans, as at the time of Jesus. However, between the time of the Greeks and the time of the Romans, there was a little period of freedom and liberation and independence for them. This was what happened. There was a guy, a young man called Judas, the Maccabee. Now, the word Maccabee means hammer. He actually hammered the Greeks and drove them out of the area around Jerusalem. At this time, the Greeks were hard on imposing their own lifestyle on the Jews. And so after the victory over this great enemy, the Greeks, the Jews used palm branches to celebrate their victory over the enemy that had been crushed. And we read in 1 Maccabees chapter 13, verse 51, and I quote, "The Jews entered the citadel with shouts of praise, the waving of branches, the playing of harps and cymbals and lyres, and the singing of hymns and canticles, because a great enemy of Israel had been crushed." Oh, did you note the reference to the use of palm branches? They used it to celebrate the crushing of the enemy and welcoming the victorious ones into the holy city. Since then, my dear friends, and for quite some time to come, palm branches became the symbol of Israel's freedom. In fact, at that time, they printed the image of palm branches on their coins at that time and added the inscription for the liberation of Israel. However, sometime later, the Romans came and conquered the Jews and colonized them. But all through the reign and the time of the Romans over the Jews always looked forward to a king or a leader or a Messiah like David of old, or like Judas, the Maccabee, or Judas the Hammer, that will drive the Romans away like the Greeks were driven away. And so, when Jesus was going into Jerusalem, the crowd welcomed him with palms as a symbol of the Maccabean nationalism, so to say. They were hoping that he would be the one that they were waiting for that will overthrow the reign of the Romans and bring them liberation once again. Let me quickly cast our minds back to the Gospel of John chapter 6, verse 15, when Jesus had just fed the 5,000 people. After that miracle, they tried to come and make him king. But the Bible says that when Jesus saw and knew what they were planning, he withdrew to the mountain by himself. But why? It was because that was not the kind of king that he was. Today, in the story of Palm Sunday, the people are doing exactly the same. He knew what was on their mind as they will welcome him into Jerusalem. They will try to make him king. That was why he gave his silent response by using a donkey, an animal that symbolizes humility, instead of a horse, an animal that symbolizes military might. Yes, Jesus is king, but not one whose rule is dependent on political or military might. Yes, he will set his people free, but not just from the Romans, but actually from the bigger enemy of evil and sin. His humble but victorious death on the cross and his resurrection on Easter Sunday is what will set his people free from the colonization of sin and death. My dear friends, as we celebrate Palm Sunday today, that triumphant entry of Jesus into Jerusalem, where do you really stand? What is your perception of Jesus and his mission on earth? Is it just to provide you food like the 5,000 people, good jobs, protection from harm, deliverance from sickness, and all other physical challenges? Are you conscious and working hard with him to hammer down and crush sin and death in your life? Now, the whole of the season of Lent has been a time for us to redispose ourselves to working for the true liberation from sin and death. And if we have truly had a good Lenten time, today, Palm Sunday, we should be proud and be able to celebrate, to raise our palm branches, rejoicing in the celebration of our deliverance from the true and big enemy of sin and death that have been crushed by the death and resurrection of Jesus, and that we too have tried to crush with our sincere Lenten observance of fasting from sin and evil. Now, if you have not done anything significant yet, all through this season of Lent, in this regard, you cannot truly raise those palm branches of victory today. No. But you still have the Holy Week to make a difference. So let us go and cooperate with Jesus to get liberated from these sins of ours and be delivered from death eternal. And then we can truly rejoice at Easter, celebrating our true liberation from the colonization of sin and death. Happy Palm Sunday.